Welcome to the Property Management Law Solutions Podcast. Your host, Attorney Tim Baldwin, will guide you in all things property management, law, markets, politics, and commentary. Your property is his priority. Here's your host, Attorney Tim Baldwin.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's episode. This is Property Management Law Solutions. I am your host, Attorney Tim Baldwin. And today we have a guest, as we usually do. And I like to have guests on this show because I like to, people don't want to just hear me. It's good to have someone who has some interesting things to talk about. And I know our guest today does. It is Janice Szymanski-Dizuzio. Right, Janice?
That's correct.
Did I get the last name correct?
As close as you can.
Okay, good. I was afraid I was going to not do well on that. But anyway, everybody, welcome Janice to this show. This is the first time Janice has been on this show, and I'm really happy that she's with us. Janice has a unique set of skills and experience and knowledge that is absolutely relevant to this podcast because Janice is in the multifamily space, and she is one of the leaders in a company that she works for. But I'm going to let her introduce herself so she can let you know a little more about what she does, so we can kick this off, Janice, with some good discussion.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tim. Well, I have been in multifamily now. It's about to be going on. I'm in my 12th year, but going on my 13th year. And started on site as a property manager. So was not in a typical leasing role, climbed through the ranks. I moved from hospitality into property management. And in that time, it's been an absolutely wild ride. Currently, I am with Bryten, which I love. It's been a great company to me. I've been with them now almost 8 years. And right now I'm VP of Learning and Development. So I oversee all of Bryten's national team members, all 1,300 of them. From a learning aspect, I cover learning and development, quality assurance right now. I just gave away my talent acquisition team back to the human resources department. But it's been a fun couple of years and lots of transitions, lots of things to learn about. So a wild ride, definitely in this industry.
Well, for the folks that don't know, I work with Bryten, and I met Janice through that connection. And of course, with Janice being in the head of learning, education training for their company, I've spoken at some of your events and have really come to appreciate Bryten. The managers there are just fantastic. The leadership, and I've said that many times, but I'll keep saying it because I believe it. So it's been a pleasure to get to know you guys and to continue to help. And so, but I thought it would be great for Janice to come on this show because, the thing that we see a lot in our businesses, you on the management side, me on the legal side, is this growing need and this growing interaction. If you want to call it the shifting grounds between law and community management. So I want to delve into that. Multifamily arena is somewhat unique to itself. It has a lot of different parts to it that maybe single family management doesn't have. And so I wanted to just you to speak with me about that and try to give the listeners a sense of what you see from your perspective on the law and the changes and how that affects your approach to property management.
Sure. So I, when I look at the 8 years that I've been with Bryten and the 13 years in the industry, I can put myself back in my shoes when I was a community manager, which has been a couple of years since I've been on site. But, I can think back to those times where the attorney and legal relationship with a community manager was pretty simple when I first got into the industry.
Yeah.
Pretty much would reach out to an attorney when we needed help with an eviction. And that was mostly it. I still remember my first attorney, Joshua Crut. He is still in South Florida. I at the time was managing a community that was both apartment community and condo. So he oversaw both of them for us. And I remember that was a very simple, easy relationship that, I maybe needed to chat with him a couple times a year. It was not a regular basis, and it was, again, mostly for evictions.
Yeah.
Since that time, I think the legal landscape, both from a, Florida state standpoint and a federal standpoint, has just grown tremendously and changed. There's that shift, right? And they can't be separate anymore. The best community managers that we have really partner with you, unless they're outside of the state and maybe they have to partner with somebody else. But, the pace of change that's occurred, we really have to rely on a more proactive relationship with our legal teams than we used to. And it's everything right now. It's, recently, obviously, we had the flood disclosures was a change, the state preemption, which was, I would think for anyone reading any of that legal language, not coming from a legal background, that was incredibly confusing.
Yeah.
Navigating through the Maya's law changes.
Yeah.
Just been a lot over the last couple of years that we've had to learn about and implement well to hopefully then avoid more litigation.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. I've been in what I do for over 20 years, 21 years now. Next year will be 22. I can't believe it. And time is just flying by. But I have seen that shift that you're talking about from what appeared to be a much simpler relationship with attorney and property manager has definitely grown. It has become more complicated. And the reason that is I believe there is just a much more heightened awareness of the legal liabilities in that business, in that space. The number of lawsuits that have been filed and continually are being filed. Attorneys who I think years ago didn't see maybe the need or maybe even the opportunity to sue landlords, but now they do. They see opportunities, and so there's that part of it as well. And then we have on the other side of it, I believe, is the tenants who, with the advent of not just the internet, but now with AI, who have a lot more information at their fingertips to sort of navigate what their situation or issue may be. Not to mention, you had COVID years, which changed even the government's interaction with what used to be, was just purely private transactions. Government stepped in, which then I think made tenants aware that, oh, government can help me, right? So there's all of these things happening. And so it really does create quite a bit of dynamics and uncertainty in the property manager's mind. So based on what you probably agree with me, Janice, but based on that, I mean, how would you respond to that description?
Completely accurate. And you're absolutely right. And like I said, I haven't been on site in a couple of years, unfortunately. But I know that right as I got off site was when COVID started.
Yeah.
And it felt like at that time we started to see that. And that was maybe the early stages of AI. I'm sure that people weren't using it very much then, but obviously in the last 2 years, that's really become quite a change. And I don't know if that's the right word, but armed tenants with more knowledge, which has been great, but also definitely has made them feel more confident in navigating the legal landscape.
Yeah.
With no prior experience in it. They can ask the questions and sort of navigate those things where that would have been more ambiguous in the years previous to it. So no, I totally agree that before it was simple, it's become complex. It's become apparent at every community. It's not like there's a specific area of the state or a specific thing that's caused it.
Right.
It seems to be literally everywhere. And again, some of those federal changes probably egged that on a little bit more.
Yeah.
So,
well, the federal arena just adds a layer of complexity to it. so the federal regulations that may apply to a multifamily unit because of the various federal programs, and there's a number of them.
Right.
And that's even just that by itself. So when we onboard new clients, we ask the question, are there any federal regulations that apply? And there's just a large number of them, but we need to know that because it affects how you handle situations. It affects the kind of notice that you may send to the tenant, on which grounds that you can terminate the tenancy or not.
Right.
So there's all of those additional regulations and rules that you've got to be aware of. And I can tell you, I mean, even as an attorney, having, doing this all the time, even now, I'm like, okay, I have to go back to the regulations. I got to refer to my treatise manual. I got to make sure I'm crossing the T's and dotting the I's. So I know that property managers who are just, they're in the day-to-day of managing property. They're not going to have that detailed understanding many times.
Right.
So you have to have that relationship with an attorney. I was going to touch on this, Janice. I mean, we're mentioning AI, but it was interesting because I read an article in the Florida Bar Journal recently where the Florida Bar is addressing this issue of AI because not only are,
Right.
litigants using it, but attorneys are using it too. To a large degree. Unfortunately, it's gotten some attorneys in trouble because they're not checking the work, they're not making sure the cases are correct, et cetera, et cetera. But it is a tremendous tool. So it was about that article, or that about AI, and one of the quotes in there was from, I can't remember which person it was in particular, but there was a study done where they submitted a bar exam to ChatGPT. I think
Oh,
this was the version 5 or the platform, and it got in the top 10% of,
wow.
which was a touting, of course, like see how great this is, which
Right.
doesn't surprise. I mean, really, honestly, it doesn't surprise me necessarily. But what is, I think, going to happen is because attorneys are trained to not just know the law, but how to analyze statutes and how they intermix with other legal authorities like statutes and court
Sure.
rulings and all these sort. But also, even more important is understanding how the facts apply to the law. And I think that what's going to happen is you have people, especially tenants who are looking to use this resource, who are going to use it incorrectly because they don't know how to apply law to facts or facts to law. But I'm curious, Janice, if in Bryten's business, if you think that the managers are seeing just this uprise in the communication level that they're seeing from tenants, that would indicate that, yes, they are definitely using this tool to leverage their situation.
Absolutely. And like I said, I'm not sure if the right word to use is armed, because we want people to have knowledge and we want people to feel confident and comfortable in their homes, to read their leases
Yeah.
and to, know what they're signing themselves up for.
Yeah.
When they sign those, right now it's like lease language for us is like between regular lease and addendums, it's like 70 pages, it seems.
Yeah.
You want your residents to feel comfortable and confident, but absolutely, they're taking lease language, they're plugging it into AI, and when something doesn't go their way, which we have to say no in every industry, we can't just serve them on a silver platter exactly what they're asking for. And when that happens, they're absolutely relying on AI to see where they can wiggle, right? Where they can find a little bit of breathing room in their ask, or push the boundary more.
Yeah.
Catch us, unprepared.
Right.
So, it's funny because when you were talking, I was thinking about the other recent change where, specifically here in Florida, which I couldn't imagine the landscape of this with AA and NAA helping guide us these things as well. And with FAA recently sort of helping win the battle of digital notices.
Yeah.
So as an industry, we've waited for something like that. We've seen that we're, behind the ball when it comes to technology, but we're also not prepared for it when the floodgates open.
Yeah.
So as an example, like Bryten right now, we very diligently said, we're not ready for that.
Mm.
We need to make sure that we have measures in place before we all of a sudden adapt to this new change and then find ourselves in, hot water later.
Yeah.
So, I think that's one thing for everyone to be cognizant of: attorneys, residents, community managers, everybody. There's a lot of great technology and AI out there, but you have to be really cognizant and cautious about what you're doing. And just because it's a software or just because it's an app and it's got this beautiful dashboard or whatever it is, you have to be cautious and not just adapt to those things too quickly. And as an industry, I think we want those types of things available to us as tools, but we've got to do our diligence before we just jump into that.
Well, it's interesting because with just using the email notices for an example, every time you have a statute that changes the way things work, and interestingly enough, and I've written about this before, but there was a fourth DCA case where the appellate court said that email notifications were perfectly fine. They actually met the definition of notice under the Landlord-related Act. And so we had that decision. And under that decision, landlords could just put in the contract, in the lease contract, hey, we're going to use email notices. The parties agree to that. That's how it was. But people still felt, I guess, uneasy about it, or hey, we need a statute. Well, interesting, with the statute though comes the fact that tenants can refuse to be served with email notices. So now it's giving tenants the power to say, no, I don't want email notice. I want you to hand deliver it to me or post it on the door or mail it. And so now there's added complexities to your system, because now not only do you have to determine has the tenant consented to the email notifications, but what if we receive their notice during, say, 6 months later saying, hey, I don't want email notices anymore. Now you've got to update your system to make sure the notices are delivered correctly. So if your staff doesn't catch that, they don't update the system, they may miss it. And now we got a notice that's not valid, right? So now there's 1 and 2 and 3 steps now that's added to your system.
Agreed. Yeah, it's that's why we've been so cautious about it. Once we start to look at, okay, this is great. On paper, we officially get to do this. Once we really thought about the process behind the scenes, we were like, let's wait a little bit. I mean, we would love to rush into it. We would love to find the digital way to solve this issue for us, but we didn't see that. One, our PMS systems, we use multiple across our organization. There was not reporting functionality there for us to be able to really do that well. And we saw some of those things before and said, you know what, let's just wait. And absolutely partnering with you to say, is this something we should do right away?
Yeah.
And again, that's that proactive sense of it and not the reactive, not all of a sudden implementing this thing we're excited about.
Yeah.
And then finding out too late. Exactly your example. We don't want a resident who's first signed up for email notifications who then has relinquished that ability from us, and we missed it on some sort of report or whatever that looks like behind the scenes. We don't, again, want to find ourselves in hot water. So, partnering with you to ask the questions and say, does this feel right for us right now? Should we wait 6 months? Should we wait a year? Or to see what the industry does before we, go forward with it?
Yeah, and then there's some changes that happen that you have no choice. Like, for example, the flood disclosure that you mentioned earlier is that there's no choice now. Like, as of October 1, 2025, you have to do this. So you think, well, this flood disclosure, I wrote about this maybe a couple of years ago, and I said I predict that Florida is probably going to do this because it was just kind of a trend going on in other parts of the country, and it sort of just kind of made sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, if this house has had flooding problems before, it would be good for the tenants to know about it. It makes sense. But now there's issues about, especially when you have larger companies who are acquiring assets from other companies. It's like, well, how do we learn when was there ever a flood? And flood is defined, of course, by the statute to be a variety of things. And so, like, that institutional knowledge, how far back in time do we need to go? The statute doesn't say. What happens when there's an acquisition that may where one owner steps into the shoes of another company, but there's not an actual new owner under the company
Right.
ownership. All these questions that arise, and while it seems so simple, yeah, if we had a flood, we got to disclose it, but it's not that simple. So you've got to go again, all these administrative burdens and processes that you now have to implement to make sure you're in compliance with the law.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, from the technology standpoint, it's like, it's great. We want that. I felt like when I first got into property management, we were a little bit in the Stone Age when it came to some of the more manual paperwork. At the time, the community that I first managed, our lease was in Word, and we had to tab through to each of the sections to fill in the information. And everyone could edit it. And it was just, I think back to those days, and I was probably a legal nightmare at that time. But so it's nice to see the technology there and, bringing our industry forward. But absolutely, I think there's gaps in the statutes that are being implemented that don't make it easy. Or again, the word ambiguous comes to mind immediately. Things are a little too ambiguous and vague from the start. And that's hard. That's hard for us to navigate alone.
Yep.
So that partnership truly is key to coming up with a strategic plan and saying, this is something that you have to implement immediately. And let's look at this and let's discuss what what you need to implement versus, again, with the digital notices, maybe it's best to wait. So sometimes it's a decision maybe we could make on our own, but it's always nice to be able to partner with you and sort of navigate those waters with, knowledge that you have behind the scenes that maybe we're not privy to.
Well, there's multiple layers to this, as you well know. So, I mean, you have statutes, of course, and you have to interpret those, and you implement policies and
Right.
procedures based on statutes and such. But there's this other side of it that's sort of like um, the land that no one really wants to go to, and that has to do with premises liability, fair housing, discrimination claims. That world is very different in the sense that you're not necessarily dealing with a statute as you are, tort law, negligence, and again, what's reasonable accommodation or what's reasonable modification. All of
Right.
these issues that, from a liability standpoint, there's risk sometimes just by the tenant making an allegation. There's some kind of a risk. So the job, of course, of property managers, asset managers, the HR team is to reduce and mitigate risk as much as possible. And that is no easy task, especially, again, when tenants have so much more information. People are way more litigious than they used to be. And there's a lot more tenant attorneys out there who are willing to take those cases.
Agreed. And it's funny, again, if I think of myself as the first community manager back in the day, we never heard of risk management. It wasn't talked about. And I don't even think that was really a term
Yeah.
that was used. And now it's like, we have to have that in house. And especially, Bryten specifically, we've grown and it's been necessary based on not only the landscape in the industry, but, just our own business needs. But that's absolutely, there's so much risk now and so much more knowledge now, and those two things I think travel hand in hand. So I'm so glad we have just a wonderful person in our company who you're very well aware of, Mike Olivieri,
Yes.
who's helped us navigate that, who comes from a risk background, and we've navigated that, I think, well. But it's a recommendation I would make to any other property management company is you've got to be armed with these things, a great advisor from a legal standpoint, and then knowledge of risk and owning some of that in-house too.
Yeah. Well, Mike and I talk probably every week.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's somewhat counterintuitive. You think, well, typically lawyers are brought in when the problem is I can't handle the problem, right? So we don't need to bring in our lawyers yet. But really, I think the opposite is true. I really think that you're better off to bring in your attorney very soon into a conflict. You want to make sure you have clear direction and know the parameters of where you need to be, know what the risks are for each decision or outcome, and that way you can make informed and wise decisions through the process. And at the end of the day, You're not going to always please every person, obviously, and then some tenants are not going to be happy, but you are going to have a better result, even for the tenant. Quite frankly, you're going to have a better result for the tenant. And so it's so. I mean, we see cases all the time where it's like, man, if they had just done this, at this stage, this would have been probably a lot better. So.
Yeah.
Again, it's just, but like you said, having people dedicated for that risk management and mitigation, uh, and having those attorneys help you is it's just critical.
Agreed. And, you know, I think I love hearing that you and Mike talk as frequently as you do, because I know we're in good hands,
Well, Mike's a good guy. I like talking to him regardless of.
Yeah. It's so great, but I agree with you. If something gets too far down the path, it's so much harder to navigate backwards.
Yes.
And hindsight is 2020, right? If you've experienced one bad eviction, let's just say, or similar situation, it's changing, right? It's something that all of a sudden sticks with you, and you don't want to have to go through that ever again.
Yeah.
That proactivity and absolutely getting you into the conversation early to help navigate things when it's a little bit easier, when there's less tension, when there's less emotion from the resident or even the team, right? Because no matter what we say, that business isn't personal, but when you are in the position as a community manager to look after the lives and the livelihood of your residents, you absolutely do take things personally.
Yes.
And so to get in those situations where there is something that's explosive and to, hopefully navigate it from the front end and be there before it does reach that stage is just key to keeping your residents happy. And at the end of the day, that's what we are here for, is to provide great homes, to provide these great places for people to live, to raise their children, to, go to school, work their jobs. And if we don't put ourselves in their shoes and think through things early enough and partner with the right people early enough, it's hard to go backwards.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can go backwards.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to unravel things once they've been undone. But, and there's so many things, and you do, experience does teach a lot. I mean, even, I would be the first to say I have a lot to learn, but through the experiences and, obviously you have to study and these types of things that you're supposed to do, but you start to see, patterns, you see trends, you see, lessons learned, obviously. But what's really fascinating to me though is, and this is me not trying to pick on other attorneys, because quite frankly, this area of law, property management, landlord tenant, and the areas that touch it are specialized. Just like you would expect if you go
Agreed.
get in a car accident, you're not going to go to a general practitioner. You're going to go to a PI law firm. That's all they do. And for good reason. You need to be an expert in that area. In as we said at the very beginning of the show, is that things have developed in such a way now to where you have to have a specialist working with you. There's just too many things. There's too many pitfalls that could happen. I'm curious though, Janice, have you seen examples where it's like, man, I really wish we didn't use that attorney. Like that wasn't his area. He just shouldn't have been doing this.
Yeah, we have. And we've also seen before that you have to find a level of an attorney that matches your where you land on the spectrum of legal guidance. And I'll explain that point. Sometimes we've had attorneys who have been a little too conservative for us, who are so risk adverse that we don't feel that we can navigate something that we absolutely have to navigate.
Yeah.
And then we've found the other end of the spectrum as well, somebody who's not conservative in any way at all. And I'm not speaking to this from a political standpoint, not at all whatsoever.
You're talking from a risk management standpoint.
Exactly, right? Then the opposite, somebody who's a little more loose, I would say, with their risk assessment of where we are on, some sort of case or something that we want to do or change. And we've I would feel that we're probably somewhere flat in the middle. We need to be able to flex both ways at certain times. So absolutely, though, we've had conversations before where I felt like sometimes somebody was a little too conservative for us or the other way around. And then we've had to navigate things from that point forward. So
I think to sum up what you
I
just
could-
said, Janice, is you need to be reasonable, right?
yeah,
You need to
right,
be reasonable thinkers, and there's always going to be risk. I mean,
right,
people, there are attorneys who always say the sky is falling every time you encounter a situation. The
yes,
sky is falling, and so if that's all you ever hear from your attorney, you think, well, we can't make any decisions. Like everything is going to
right,
result in us paying out money or being found liable for something. At the same time, the attorney who just doesn't say anything to you at all about, hey, here are your risks, here's the possible outcomes, they're also doing a disservice to you. So you're supposed to balance that out with reality. There is reality, and reasonableness.
agreed. And you hit the nail on the head there. There was something specifically that you said that I've already forgotten, but I could imagine myself as a community manager with an attorney who is a little too conservative, and the stress that then I would feel in not being able to navigate things and feeling sort of stuck then with always being fearful.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but when I come to work, that's the last thing I want to feel.
Yeah.
Fear. I want to come into this and I want to feel confident in both my knowledge and my decision making. So for a community manager, finding the right attorney and growing that relationship and then feeling confident with each other's support is just a success key by far.
That is tremendously stated, and I've not thought about it from that standpoint. But what came to mind when you said that was, even as an ad slogan, remove the fear.
Agreed.
Remove the fear. I mean, you're absolutely you cannot perform at your max potential when you fear every decision you make.
Yeah.
But with that, though, knowledge is power. And so when you educate yourself, which is what you're trying to do, I know you educate your teams. There's no way that they can know everything. They're never going to know everything. But it's that continual training and gaining knowledge, and then again having these relationships with professionals, including attorneys, who say, yes, you're on the right track. We can tweak this, we can tweak that, whatever, but you're doing a good job, and continue to do it. And that emboldens them to want to learn more, to want to do better, and to not be afraid that everything they do is going to result in, again, the sky is falling.
Yeah, and it is one of the things I think community managers, if they are fearful, like my advice to them, I think I would give is sit down and read your lease, number one.
Yes.
Because you can't be knowledgeable unless you know what that says. Absolutely. And I think that's like one of those things for like a community manager, like week one of your job, you should sit down, find some quiet time, read through your lease, highlight some things that maybe you have some questions about. And that's where you start to build that attorney relationship.
Yeah.
Go to that person and say, I've read through the lease. There's a couple areas where I'm just not sure what this means. Could you help me?
Yep.
At least then you've built a foundation, not only of knowledge at your community, but also then with your attorney to navigate things in the future. So, and I think that's the best way to serve your residents too, is to really know exactly what the lease says so you can speak to it with confidence and not fear. Because otherwise those 70 pages look very intimidating.
They do, but you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. And I say this all the time, is that the lease in a large part is a business document, and it's an operations manual.
Right.
If you not only do you know it, and you can go, where the provisions are, but you can envision the context of those provisions. Like, in what context does this provision make sense, and how does it work? And so Janice, you could literally take your lease and train your employees, your staff members, from the lease for forever, and it'd be sufficient for them to have a good understanding of what they're supposed to do.
Agreed. So now I'm curious, what do you think is one of the things you would arm a community manager with, if you could, from a legal standpoint? Because I think that's, I know my own experience as a community manager, and again, hindsight's 2020. What I wish I knew 13 years ago. But what about you? What do you see now as community managers? What's like the tough thing that we're always constantly coming to you with that you wish, well, I wish they taught this right away?
Yeah. I think if, first of all, I'll be very broad, and I want to
Sure.
boil it down to two things, basically. You need to know what's the landlord's obligations and what's the tenant obligations.
Okay.
Those obligations are found in the lease, as we just mentioned, as well as in 83.51, the landlord's obligations, and 83.52, tenant obligations. You need to, that is your foundation. When you understand obligations, now you know how to act and respond to situations. From there, it's knowing how to also to deal with conflict in context
Mm,
of those obligations. So when a tenant is making an allegation of, for an example, my neighbor is threatening me, right? My unit neighbor is threatening me, and so you think, well, we have two tenants in play here. We have one saying that the other tenant is being violent or whatever, and the other one, the other tenant is the one maybe doing that. Well, is it true? Like we need evidence. So
sure.
where are steps I need to take to gather the evidence, to act timely? And again, that's also pulling resources. Your on-site security guy, your maybe even your maintenance team, is there a ring camera there, right? So it's like gathering the evidence that you need, and you're using people to help you gather the evidence. So then with information, you can make informed decisions about what is my obligation in this situation. So, and it's kind of like law school. What are the facts? What's the law? When you have those two things, you can come down to a pretty good decision, and most of the time be pretty accurate. So I think that, and that's very broad, but you have to
Yeah.
have information.
Right.
So using people and on the team and the resources you have to gather as much as you can, and make a good decision that way.
It's funny, as you were saying that, it made me think of human resources. And I know we mentioned them earlier as sort of helping us navigate risk, internally. And it's the same thing when you have a risk with a team member. It's like you have to have that documentation in place. So if we had that mentality of, you would never terminate someone or whatever that looks like, right? Put them on a PIP and have them navigate, performance changes. You would never do that without evidence. And so we have to adapt to that same mentality as community managers, that you're sort of having to look to your residents in the same way and do that same sort of documentation to help you navigate if things do get tougher down the road.
Yes. Oh, and here's the thing too that helps. So with the documentation, and that could be written statements, it could be pictures, it could be videos. I mean, whatever the documentation that's relevant to your decision making, that then allows you to hand it to the person who can help advise you on the proper decision, because that person is going to want to know the same thing, right? Like, so what's going on? Like, what's the evidence? Because you can't terminate a tenancy without evidence. If you go to court, the court's going to require evidence. If the tenant hires an attorney, they're going to want evidence, right? So it's like you're information managers in a lot of ways, but you're people managers too.
Right.
So
Yeah, we lean a lot into that with our incident reporting process.
mhm.
We're really cognizant of, if something does happen at the communities, which it does, right? We try to mitigate wherever we can, but risk is there, as you said. But for us, it's a lot of document collection, and like you said, pictures, videos, lease copies, anything that's been put into writing, emails, anything like that. It's just you're absolutely right that part of that role as a community manager and a way to navigate this landscape again is to do that, right? That's your due diligence in trying to make your way through different incidents or resident issues, to collect all those things and just make sure you get them before they're too old, right? People lose things over time, they forget stuff. So
Right.
I think that's
a
like
big reason why you do that. So, well,
absolutely.
Janice, I want to respect your time, and I really greatly appreciate your being on the show. I look forward to the next time we meet together. I don't know if there's any plans for that yet for Bryten, but I'll definitely try to keep my calendar open for the next time we get to spend time together.
Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate being here. And I hope to all the listeners, that you've found today not only resourceful, but something that enlightens you as you navigate the legal landscape. And hopefully you pick up the phone, maybe call your attorney and say hello.
Yeah, make good friends with your attorney.
Exactly.
Very good. Well, thanks so much. And everybody, thanks for joining us today on this show. We greatly appreciate it. Obviously, it's going to be on the audio podcast and the video podcast. If you haven't followed us, go ahead and follow us now. You'll get more podcast information just like this in the future. We love talking about property management. So thanks again and have a good one, y'all. See you on the next one.